And when we first got together, we would drink a lot together. And we had a session of, romance, drinking, partying. It's about 4 in the morning, and he says to me, "How much do you really love me?"
The day of farewell. The day began not with words, but with silence. A silence heavy enough to be felt by thousands who gathered in Birmingham and by millions more who watched from afar. The silence was broken only by the slow toll of church bells and the quiet footsteps of mourners. It was the day the world said goodbye to Ozzy Osbourne. But within that collective farewell, one figure stood out more than all others: Sharon Osbourne. Photographs from that day spread quickly. They showed a woman dressed in black, her head slightly bowed, her face marked by grief that words could not describe. These pictures became the most powerful testimony of that day. People could read articles, they could hear reports, but it was Sharon's face in those images that captured the depth of the loss. It was not the face of the celebrity manager or the sharp television personality people had known for years. It was the face of a wife whose partner had been taken from her. Every photograph seemed to carry layers of meaning. In one, Sharon was seen clutching a ring, a small but significant gesture. To many, it symbolized holding on to the bond that death could not sever. That single image, her hand gripping the ring tightly, was shared across social media, appearing on front pages and news broadcasts. People stared at it, and they felt her pain. It was a detail small enough to miss in the moment, yet powerful enough to define the memory of that day. In other pictures, Sharon was surrounded by her children. Kelly, Jack, and Amy walked close beside her. Their presence was strong, but the images revealed something else too. Even surrounded by family, grief has a way of isolating the one who feels it most deeply. Sharon's posture, the way her shoulders curved inward, the heaviness in her steps, all of it told the world that this was her personal heartbreak, even as it was shared publicly. The funeral itself carried solemn rituals, but it was Sharon who became the unspoken center. Cameras captured her lowering her head during prayers, her lips pressed together as if holding back a flood of emotion. Some images showed her with tears glistening in her eyes, others with a gaze fixed far ahead, as if trying to focus on something beyond the present moment. Every frame spoke of the unbearable reality she was facing, saying goodbye to the man who had been by her side for decades. These photographs became more than just records of a funeral. They became windows into grief. Fans around the world studied them carefully. They noticed how Sharon's face seemed to age years in a single day. They noticed how her usual strength looked different, still present, but softened by sorrow. They noticed the way she leaned slightly toward her children, as if drawing strength while still carrying more weight than anyone else could imagine. The contrast between Ozzy's image as the Prince of Darkness and Sharon's quiet devastation on that day struck many people deeply. For years, fans had seen Ozzy as untouchable, larger than life, impossible to imagine without Sharon by his side. But the pictures of Sharon at the funeral broke that illusion. They showed the truth that behind every legend is a family, and behind every icon is a partner who carries the most painful goodbye. Some photographs focused not only on Sharon's grief, but on the crowd around her. Thousands of fans lined the streets, some dressed in black, others holding flowers, many raising their hands in Ozzy's signature peace sign. Sharon's presence among them connected the private and the public. Her sorrow was hers alone, but it reflected theirs too. The images captured a shared mourning, one woman's heartbreak mirrored in the faces of countless strangers. Commentators described the images as heart-wrenching. Newspapers wrote that Sharon's visible grief was the true headline of the day, but no description could match the emotional weight carried by the photographs themselves. They required no explanation. They told a story on their own. A wife, a family, a farewell. The picture of Sharon leaving the church doors was among the most powerful. The coffin had been carried inside, the prayers had been spoken, the tributes delivered. But when she walked back through those doors, the reality of finality seemed to set in. Cameras caught her expression, half determined, half broken. It was the face of someone forced to keep moving even when every step felt impossible. That image circulated globally within hours, and for many, it became the defining picture of Ozzy's farewell. What made these pictures so gripping was not glamour or perfection, it was vulnerability. Sharon did not try to hide her emotions. She did not mask her tears. She allowed the world to see her heartbreak, and in doing so, she reminded everyone that grief is universal. It does not matter if you are famous, wealthy, or powerful. When you lose the person you love, you are brought to your knees just like anyone else. The images also sparked curiosity. Viewers asked questions that the photographs could not answer. How would Sharon survive the days after? What would her first words be once the silence broke? Would she retreat entirely, or would she face the public again? Each picture seemed like a chapter, but the story was unfinished. The farewell had been captured, but what came next remained unknown. In the midst of all this, fans reflected on Sharon's role in Ozzy's life. They remembered pictures of her beside him at award shows, guiding him on tours, supporting him through illness. Seeing her at the funeral completed that picture in the most tragic way. She had been with him through everything, and now she was with him at the end. It was loyalty made visible, and it touched people deeply. The day of farewell was not just about Ozzy's coffin being lowered, or the prayers being read. It was also about Sharon's images, because they revealed the human side of loss in a way words never could. They showed the cost of love, the pain of partnership, and the reality of widowhood. For many who saw them, the photographs felt like mirrors. They saw their own losses reflected in Sharon's face, their own pain in her tears, and so the pictures of Sharon Osbourne on that day became timeless. They were more than just funeral photographs, they were lessons in grief. They reminded people that no amount of fame can shield you from heartbreak. They revealed that love, when real, leaves behind a silence so heavy it cannot be hidden. As the day ended, as the streets cleared and the cameras lowered, the images remained. They were replayed on television, printed in newspapers, and shared endlessly online. People looked at them not once, but again and again, each time finding some new layer of meaning. The photographs had become part of the history of rock, part of the story of love and loss, part of the story of Sharon and Ozzy Osbourne. But the pictures also left something unfinished. They made people wonder, what would Sharon's next picture look like?
I met Ozzy when I was around 18, and he came into my father's office for management with Black Sabbath. So I was 18 when I first met him.
Love at first sight?
No, not at all. I was like, oh Lord, look at them.
Would it show healing, or would it show continued sorrow? Would it reveal resilience, or would it reveal a broken spirit? The farewell was captured, but the aftermath had not yet been revealed. This is why the photographs from the day of farewell continue to hold power. They are not just about what they show, they are also about what they leave unseen. They open questions, they create curiosity, they remind us that grief does not end with a funeral, it begins there. And the story of Sharon Osbourne's grief, as told through her images, was only just starting.
My soulmate. Sometimes I love her, sometimes I don't love her, sometimes I'm angry with her. Sometimes I'm crazy about her. Sometimes I'm very jealous of her. Sometimes I want to fucking kill her. But through it all, at the end of the day, I love her more than anything in the world. Put it this way, I couldn't live without her. I don't want to live without her. And my love for her now is bigger than it ever has been.
After the burial, after the day of farewell, the world expected silence, and silence is exactly what came. The streets of Birmingham had emptied, the bells had stopped ringing, and the last mourners had drifted home. But for Sharon Osbourne, the real weight of grief began only then. Pictures taken after the funeral showed a different kind of sorrow. Not the ceremonial grief of a widow standing in public, but the quiet devastation of a woman returning to a world without her husband. The first photographs that emerged showed Sharon leaving the service, stepping into waiting cars, surrounded by family. In those images, she no longer had the strength of ritual to lean on. The formality of prayers and hymns was gone. Instead, her expression carried the heaviness of what came next. Life after goodbye. Her lips pressed tightly together, her eyes swollen from tears. She looked less like a public figure and more like every woman who has ever walked out of a funeral, wondering how to keep going. Observers studied those images with care. Fans who had followed Sharon and Ozzy for decades recognized something unusual. Sharon was always composed, sharp, decisive, even in moments of crisis. But here, the pictures revealed someone stripped of that armor. Her grief was unfiltered, her pain raw. It was not the Sharon people had seen on television. It was not the Sharon who had managed tours and fought for Ozzy's career. This was Sharon, the widow, walking into an uncertain future. The silence that followed became its own kind of headline. For days she said nothing publicly. Her social media remained still. No interviews were given, no statements were released, and so the only evidence of her grief came from the few photographs captured during and immediately after the burial. Each picture was examined closely, as if people could decode her silence by reading the lines of her face. Fans expressed their emotions online. Many said the images broke their hearts more than the funeral itself. They saw in Sharon's silence a reflection of their own experiences with loss. Some wrote that they remembered walking out of funerals with the same empty gaze. Others said they recognized the look of someone holding pain so deep it cannot yet be spoken aloud. The curiosity surrounding Sharon only deepened. People asked questions. When would she speak? What would she say? Would she appear on television again or retreat entirely? The lack of answers made the photographs even more significant. They became not just snapshots of a single day, but symbols of an ongoing silence. One particular image circulated widely. It showed Sharon sitting quietly in the back seat of a car as it pulled away from the church. Her face was turned slightly toward the window, her eyes distant. The glass reflected both her and the outside world, creating a haunting double image, Sharon inside, grieving, and the world outside, watching. That single photograph was described as the image of emptiness. It seemed to capture the loneliness of grief more clearly than words ever could. Commentators noted that these photographs revealed something essential about Sharon. For years, she had been seen as strong, even unbreakable. She was the manager who rescued Ozzy's career, the judge who dominated television screens, the woman who faced critics without fear. But now, the images told a different story. They revealed her humanity in its most vulnerable form. They showed that strength does not mean being untouched by pain. It means carrying pain even when the world is watching. Fans around the globe clung to these pictures as their only connection to Sharon's grief. They shared them online, paired with messages of support, prayers and memories of Ozzy. The images created a sense of community among people who had never met Sharon, yet felt bonded to her through shared mourning. At the same time, the photographs left people unsettled. They raised questions that lingered. Would Sharon recover? Would she ever smile again? Would she find peace in her memories? Or would the weight of loss remain visible in every future image of her? The curiosity became part of the story itself. Sharon's silence made people want to know more, to understand how she was coping in the days after the burial. In many ways, the absence of words gave the pictures even more power. They were the only evidence available, the only glimpse into Sharon's emotional state. And because they could not speak for themselves, they created endless speculation. People projected their own feelings onto them. They saw in Sharon's face what they themselves had felt when losing someone. The images became mirrors as much as they were windows. As the days passed, the world moved forward. Headlines shifted, new stories took the spotlight. But for those who had followed Ozzy and Sharon for years, the images from after the burial remained etched in memory.
Ozzy Osbourne's death at the age of 76 was just the latest in a decades-long string of tragedies for his wife of 43 years, Sharon Osbourne.
They were not dramatic or glamorous. They were quiet, subdued, almost ordinary. And yet that ordinariness is what made them extraordinary. They showed that even icons grieve like everyone else. What those pictures revealed most of all was the reality of love's cost. Sharon's face, her silence, her stillness, all of it told a single truth. When you love deeply, you grieve deeply. And no amount of fame can soften that blow. And so the photographs of Sharon Osbourne after the burial became more than news. They became symbols. Symbols of silence, of emptiness, of love, and of resilience yet to come. They reminded people that a funeral is not an ending. It is the beginning of learning how to live without someone who has always been there. But these images also left a gap, a question unanswered. If the day of farewell showed us Sharon's grief during the ceremony, and the days after showed us her silence, what about the years before?
I've put my wife through so much pain. In 1989, I lost control and nearly hurt her. I ended up in jail because of it. Despite everything I did to her, she kept forgiving me. She's not just my wife, she's also my manager. She's been with me from the very bottom to where I am today. Over the years, the toll has been heavy. My health has deteriorated, my spine is damaged, and I now have to lean on a microphone stand just to sing. Even with a net worth of $800 million, I live in a moldy, rundown old house. The kitchen still has appliances from decades ago. Some say it's rebellion. Others take one look at how broken I am and run. In 2023, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. My body is growing weaker by the day, yet Sharon continues to stand by me, managing my career and staying by my side for every tour around the world. She's been hurt over and over, but she still chooses to stay.
What would the pictures taken in happier times reveal? And how would they change the way we see Sharon now? That question would be answered in the next chapter, as people began to revisit the photographs of Sharon Osbourne taken before Ozzy's death. Images not of farewell, but of life, of partnership, of love that spanned decades. The documentary of a final chapter. When the announcement came that Paramount Plus would release a documentary about Ozzy Osbourne's last years, the world paused again. For fans, it was more than just another film. It was a promise of one final window into the life of a man whose story had already been told in headlines, in reality television, in songs, and in scandals. But this time was different. This time the story was not about survival. It was about the struggle with mortality. Titled Ozzy, No Escape from Now, the documentary was first imagined as a chronicle of resilience. It was meant to capture Ozzy's battle with illness, his attempts to keep performing, his return to the studio, and the way Sharon stood by him during every fragile moment. But after Ozzy's death, the project transformed. What was once a story of endurance became a memorial, a farewell preserved on screen. Audiences who had already studied the pictures of Sharon during the funeral after the burial before the end now waited for moving pictures, for voices, for confessions caught on film. They wanted to hear Ozzy's own words about his pain, his regrets, his love. They wanted to see Sharon's perspective, not just frozen in grief, but alive in reflection. The trailer alone was enough to stir emotions. It hinted at unseen footage, Ozzy in moments of weakness, Ozzy in hospital rooms, Ozzy facing the mirror with the reality of Parkinson's and surgeries. It hinted at laughter too, at resilience, at the stubborn spark that defined him until the very end. Sharon appeared in the preview as well, her voice shaking, her face carrying both pride and sorrow. That glimpse alone told fans what to expect, a film raw in its honesty, heavy in its humanity. The documentary promised to show more than just decline. It would highlight Ozzy's last albums, Ordinary Man and Patient Number 9, music that was born not from strength but from fragility. These records were not only artistic expressions, they were lifelines. They proved that even as the body failed, the spirit could still create. In the film, Sharon and the children would explain how those projects kept him alive, how they gave him purpose in moments when despair was near. But the film would also confront regret. Audiences expected to see Ozzy's disappointment over cancelled tours, his sorrow at not being able to perform as he once had. They expected to hear him speak openly about the frustration of being trapped in a body that no longer matched the energy of his mind. This honesty would cut deep, but it would also make the legend more real. For Sharon, the documentary was both gift and burden. As producer, she shaped the narrative. As widow, she carried the grief. Her voice in the film would reveal not only the practical side of managing Ozzy's illness, but also the private pain of watching her partner fade. Viewers anticipated moments where her strength cracked, where regret slipped through. Would she admit the choices she wished had been different? Would she confess how heavy the years had been? That question hung in the air, making curiosity as strong as sorrow. The inclusion of fans in the documentary would also matter. Shots of crowds, tributes, and gatherings would show that Ozzy's story was not only personal but global. His death did not just belong to his family. It belonged to millions who felt connected to him through music, through decades of rebellion, through shared memories of youth. Seeing Sharon among them in the film would close the circle. Private grief, public grief, joined as one. People knew that watching the documentary would not be easy. It would mean revisiting Ozzy's final performance at Villa Park, hearing his voice one last time, watching his body strain against illness. It would mean seeing Sharon beside him, carrying the weight of knowing what was coming. Yet that difficulty is what made the film necessary. It would capture not only an ending, but the courage inside that ending. The images of Sharon at the funeral and after the burial had already become iconic. But the documentary would add motion, sound, and confession to those still frames. It would give context to her silence. It would show the moments that led to those tears, the conversations behind those bowed shoulders. For fans who had only seen fragments, it would provide the whole. And so the world prepared. They expected tears. They expected revelation. They expected to see Ozzy not as the untouchable Prince of Darkness, but as a man confronting the one thing none of us can escape, time. They expected to see Sharon, not as manager or TV judge, but as a woman stripped of everything except love and grief. What comes after the release of this documentary is predictable in one sense and mysterious in another. Predictable because fans will flood social media with tributes, sharing clips, posting their own memories. Mysterious because no one knows how Sharon herself will respond. Will she find closure in seeing Ozzy's final chapter told honestly, or will it reopen wounds too fresh to heal? The curiosity is as sharp as the sorrow. What is certain is this: Ozzy No Escape From Now will become more than just a film. It will become the permanent bookend to his story, the final picture in the sequence of images before, during, and after that the world has already studied. It will cement Ozzy's legacy, and it will also reveal Sharon's, a legacy not only of managing and protecting, but of loving and end on, until the very end.